Millionaire CEO sees homeless woman playing with his disabled daughter. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again," she says, "and it changes her life forever." Hit the comments and tell us your city or country. Let's see how far this story reaches. The autumn wind swept through Central Park, carrying with it the last vestiges of summer's warmth. James Reynolds pushed his daughter's wheelchair along the cobblestone path, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the ground. At 42, James had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking the city, a fleet of luxury cars, and a technology empire that had made him a fortune. Yet his eyes, a steely blue that matched the September sky, held a hollowness that his wealth couldn't fill. "Dad, can we stop by the duck pond?" Emma's small voice broke through his thoughts. At 10 years old, Emma Reynolds possessed a resilience that constantly amazed him. Her golden hair, so like her mother's, was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her bright eyes sparkled with life despite the tragedy that had confined her to a wheelchair 3 years ago. James checked his watch, a habit he couldn't break even on these Sunday outings that were supposed to be sacred time with his daughter. "Sure, sweetheart. Just for a little while, I have some calls to make later." Emma's smile dimmed slightly, but she nodded, used to sharing her father with his never-ending business demands. Since the accident that took her ability to walk and the cancer that stole her mother just a year ago, their relationship had become a delicate dance of unspoken grief. As they approached the pond, James's phone buzzed. He pulled it out immediately, scanning an email from Catherine, his sister and chief operating officer. More problems at the company, more fires to put out, more reasons to retreat into work rather than face the painful reality of his broken family. "Mr. Reynolds?" A soft voice interrupted his digital escape. James looked up, irritated at the intrusion. Standing before them was a young woman, hardly more than 19, with long, tangled dark hair and clothes that had clearly seen better days. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was something striking about her, an intensity in her hazel eyes that made James uncomfortable. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested," he said dismissively, moving to push Emma's wheelchair around the girl. "I'm not selling anything," she replied, stepping directly into their path. "My name is Harper, and I can help your daughter walk again." James froze, anger flashing across his face. "That's completely inappropriate. How dare you approach us with such nonsense?" Emma, however, leaned forward in her wheelchair, studying the strange young woman with curiosity. "How?" she asked simply, ignoring her father's protective hand on her shoulder. Harper knelt down to Emma's level, her movements graceful despite her worn clothing. "I have a gift," she said, her voice carrying an unmistakable conviction. "Some call it faith healing, others call it energy work. I've helped others before." "That's enough," James snapped, pulling Emma's wheelchair back. "Stay away from my daughter. We believe in science and medicine, not street corner miracles." But Emma twisted in her chair to look back at Harper as her father hurriedly pushed her away. Something in the young woman's eyes had sparked a feeling Emma hadn't experienced in years: hope. "Dad, wait," Emma protested. "What if she really could help?" "Emma, people like that prey on vulnerability," James replied firmly. "They make promises they can't keep for money or attention." "I don't want your money," Harper called after them, remaining where she stood. "The mediation treatments you've been trying aren't working. The experimental stem cell therapy you're considering has only a 10% success rate." James stopped abruptly, turning back. "How could you possibly know about that?" Harper's expression remained unreadable. "I just know things sometimes, about people, about what they need." As James stared at the young woman, trying to decide between calling security and demanding more answers, a gust of wind swept through the park, sending golden leaves swirling around them in a strange, almost choreographed dance. "Please," Harper said quietly, "just give me a chance to explain." For reasons he couldn't understand, James found himself nodding slightly. Something in Harper's unwavering gaze reminded him of Sarah, his late wife, who had always believed in possibilities where he only saw limitations. Little did James know that this chance encounter would be the first step on a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about faith, science, and the power of the human spirit. The sleek glass elevator of Reynolds Tower carried James to his penthouse office on the 52nd floor. The cityscape stretched beneath him, a concrete kingdom he had built, yet it felt hollow since Sarah's death. Inside, Catherine waited, her tailored suit and perfect posture embodying the corporate efficiency that had helped build Reynolds Tech. "The board is concerned, James," she said, skipping pleasantries. "You've missed 3 meetings this month." James loosened his tie. "I was at Emma's appointments, which brings me to my other concern." Catherine's voice softened fractionally. "You're chasing miracle cures again, aren't you?" The accusation hung between them. Since the accident that paralyzed Emma and Sarah's subsequent cancer diagnosis, James had indeed pursued every medical avenue, exhausting specialists globally. "The stem cell therapy has potential," he defended. 10% success rate, Catherine countered. "Meanwhile, the company needs leadership." She placed a folder on his desk. "These decisions can't wait." As she left, James turned to the window, memories flooding back. 3 years ago, before the accident, they had been a perfect family. Emma had been a budding gymnast, Sarah a vibrant artist and philanthropist. Then came the fall during practice, the diagnosis of spinal cord damage, and the devastating words, "She may never walk again." Sarah had been their rock, maintaining optimism through Emma's grueling rehabilitation. Then, as if fate hadn't been cruel enough, came Sarah's diagnosis, aggressive pancreatic cancer. Within 8 months she was gone, leaving behind a spiritually bankrupt husband and a physically limited daughter. Across town, Harper huddled in the back room of a shelter, her few possessions tucked into a worn backpack. Among them, the bronze medallion, her only connection to a mother she had never known. "You're back," noted Marion, the elderly volunteer who ran the place. "Rough night?" Harper nodded, accepting a cup of soup. "I met someone today, a man and his daughter in the park." Marion raised an eyebrow. "The same feeling again?" "Stronger than ever," Harper confirmed. "The girl, she's supposed to walk, I can see it so clearly." Marion sighed. Harper's feelings had led to trouble before. Her uncanny ability to sense people's pain, and sometimes their futures, had earned her suspicion more often than gratitude. "Be careful," Marion warned. "Rich folks don't take kindly to strangers offering miracles." Harper fingered the medallion, tracing its worn inscription. "Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts." "It's not about miracles," she said quietly. "It's about connecting what's broken." Neither James nor Harper realized yet how deeply their paths were meant to intertwine, or that the medallion Harper carried held more significance to the Reynolds family than anyone could imagine. The coffee had grown cold in James's cup as he reviewed the latest medical reports for Emma. Stack of papers chronicled 3 years of treatments, therapies, and disappointing results. Outside his office window, rain streaked down the glass, mirroring his mood. His phone rang. Dr. Chen's office calling to confirm tomorrow's consultation about the experimental stem cell treatment. James confirmed mechanically, his mind already calculating the astronomical costs against the minimal chances of success. As he exited the Reynolds Tower later that evening, the rain had intensified. James barely noticed the downpour soaking through his expensive suit, until a familiar figure stepped into his path. "Mr. Reynolds," Harper said, her dark hair plastered to her face from the rain. Despite her drenched appearance, her eyes held that same unsettling intensity from the park. "You need to stop following me," James warned, glancing around for security. "I'm not following you," Harper replied. "I just knew you'd be here." Before James could call for help, Harper reached into her pocket and pulled out a bronze medallion on a tarnished chain. "This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me before she died." James stared at the object, ancient-looking, with intricate engravings surrounding worn lettering. "Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts," Harper translated, her voice soft against the rainfall. "Your daughter needs this more than I do now." "Look," James said, exasperation mixing with pity. "I don't know what your angle is, but—" "I don't have an angle, Mr. Reynolds," Harper interrupted. I have a purpose. Sometimes we're meant to cross paths with people for reasons beyond our understanding. Something in her words, reminiscent of Sarah's philosophy, made James hesitate. Against his better judgment, he reached out and took the medallion. It's not magical, Harper continued. It's a reminder. Sometimes healing begins when we look beyond what science can explain. Thank you, James said stiffly, pocketing the medallion. More to end the conversation than anything else. Now please stop approaching me or my daughter. Harper nodded, stepping back into the shadows of the building. Just keep an open mind, Mr. Reynolds. Miracles don't announce themselves with fanfare. They slip in through the cracks of our doubt. As James walked away, hailing a taxi, he couldn't shake the strange sense that this wasn't coincidence. Sarah had often spoken about the universes, patterns, connections invisible until hindsight revealed them. At home, he found Emma asleep, her favorite book still open on her lap. Gently, he placed the medallion on her nightstand, not entirely sure why he'd brought it home. The inscription caught the lamplight. Faith moves mountains. For a moment, James allowed himself to wonder. What if? Morning light filtered through Emma's bedroom window as she examined the bronze medallion, turning it over in her small hands. James watched from the doorway, surprised by her fascination with the old trinket. Where did you get this, Dad? Emma asked, tracing the worn inscription with her fingertip. James hesitated. Someone gave it to me. Just a trinket, really. It was that lady from the park, wasn't it? Harper? Emma's perception always caught him off guard. I dreamt I was running last night after you put this beside my bed. James felt a strange chill, despite himself. Emma, honey, you know dreams are just... His phone rang, interrupting their moment. The caller ID showed Dr. Michael Landon, an old college friend who had become a respected neurologist. James hadn't spoken to him in months. Mike? This is unexpected. James, I've been reviewing Emma's case files, Michael said without preamble. There's a treatment you need to know about. Dr. Nathan Chen at Columbia is doing something revolutionary with neural stimulation combined with stem cell therapy. James sighed. We've explored stem cells, Mike. The success rate is dismal. This is different, Michael insisted. Chen's approach shows a 30% improvement in patients with injuries similar to Emma's. I've sent you his research. James glanced at Emma, still entranced by the medallion. What's the catch? It's experimental, expensive, and intensive, Michael admitted. But James, I've seen the results firsthand. Kids who were told they'd never stand again are taking steps. After ending the call, James opened the email on his tablet. The medical jargon was dense, but the before and after videos of patients were undeniable. In one, a 12-year-old boy with an injury similar to Emma's took 4 wobbly steps without support. Dad? Emma called from her bed. Can I ask you something? James approached, sitting on the edge of her mattress. Anything, sweetheart? Do you think Mom would want us to try everything? Even things that seem impossible? James felt his throat tighten. Sarah had always been the believer in their family, the one who saw possibilities where he saw only probabilities, and risk assessments. She would, he admitted softly. Emma held up the medallion. Then I think we should listen to Harper, and maybe this doctor too. Against his practical nature, James found himself nodding. I'll make a call today. As Emma smiled, a real smile that had become increasingly rare, James couldn't shake the strange timing of it all. Harper's appearance, the medallion, Michael's call about a treatment he hadn't known existed, for the first time since Sarah's death. James allowed himself to consider that perhaps some things couldn't be explained by logic alone. James sat alone in his home office, surrounded by medical journals, research papers, and the proposal from Dr. Chen. The stark statistics stared back at him. 30% improvement rate, but also a list of potential complications that made his stomach tighten. Was he being selfish, subjecting Emma to more pain when she had already endured so much? He picked up the framed photo on his desk. Sarah, radiant in the Tuscan sunlight during their last family vacation before her diagnosis. Her voice seemed to whisper in his memory. Sometimes the greatest risk is not taking one at all. The bronze medallion now lay on his desk, catching the lamplight. James had taken it from Emma's nightstand after she'd fallen asleep, intending to research its origins. Instead, he found himself turning it over repeatedly like a worry stone. Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts. Sarah would have loved the sentiment. She had been the heart of their family, while he had always been the practical mind. Without her balance, he'd retreated further into logic and numbers, finding comfort in their predictability, while the rest of his world crumbled. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma had wheeled herself to his office door, her face serious. In the dim light, "You're worried about the new treatment," she said. It wasn't a question. James nodded, unable to hide the truth from his perceptive daughter. "There are risks, Emma. Serious ones." "I know," she said, wheeling closer. "But I think we should try anyway." The certainty in her voice startled him. "How can you be so sure?" Emma smiled, a smile so like her mother's that it made his chest ache. "Mom always said that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward even when you're scared." James knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her small hands in his. "When did you get so wise?" "I've had good teachers," she replied, squeezing his hands. "And Dad? I had another dream last night. I was running along the beach, and Mom was watching." She was smiling. Tears pricked at James's eyes. He'd built his empire on calculated risks, on weighing probabilities and making strategic decisions. But this wasn't business. This was his daughter's life, her future, her hope. The medallion gleamed on his desk, as if waiting for his decision. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll meet with Dr. Chen tomorrow." As Emma slept that night, James stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was Harper, the strange young woman who had appeared in their lives like a character from one of Sarah's beloved novels. Mysterious, unexpected, and somehow pivotal. For the first time in over a year, James allowed himself to hope, not with the cautious optimism of a businessman, but with the desperate faith of a father who would move mountains for his child. Dr. Nathan Chen's medical facility occupied the top floor of a sleek building in the Columbia University Medical Center. Unlike the cold, sterile environments Emma had grown accustomed to, this space felt almost inviting with its warm lighting and colorful abstract paintings. Emma sat tall in her wheelchair, her eyes taking in the complex equipment surrounding the treatment bed. James stood nearby, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of a chair, studying the consent forms he'd just signed. "The procedure is called neuroregenerative stimulation," Dr. Chen explained, his voice gentle but authoritative. He was younger than James had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with intelligent eyes behind rimless glasses. "We'll be combining electrical stimulation with targeted stem cell delivery." "And the pain?" James asked, recalling the warnings in the paperwork. "Doctor?" Chen's expression remained steady. "I won't lie to you. The stimulation can be intense as we're essentially reawakening dormant neural pathways." He turned to Emma. "But we can stop any time you say." Emma nodded, surprisingly calm. "I'm ready." As technicians prepared Emma for the procedure, James retreated to a corner of the room, watching helplessly as they attached electrodes to his daughter's legs and back. He found himself clutching the bronze medallion in his pocket, its edges pressing into his palm. "Beginning stimulation at 10%, announced a technician. Emma's body tensed immediately, her small fingers gripping the bed rails. James started forward, but her determined glance stopped him. "I'm okay, Dad," she said through gritted teeth. "It just feels strange." For the next 45 minutes, James witnessed his daughter's courage as the intensity gradually increased. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but not once did she ask them to stop. Dr. Chen worked methodically, injecting stem cells at precise points identified by imaging, while monitoring her responses. When it was finally over, Emma looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "Did it work?" she asked Dr. Chen. "This is just the beginning," he replied kindly. The real work happens over time, as your body responds to the treatment. As James wheeled Emma out of the building, he spotted a familiar figure across the street, Harper, her dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight. She didn't approach them, just watched with an expression of quiet certainty before disappearing into the crowd. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled him back. "I saw her too." That night, as Emma slept deeply from exhaustion, James researched Harper's medallion online. The inscription appeared to be a variation of an ancient quote, but the medallion itself remained mysterious, its origins untraceable. Like Harper herself, it seemed to exist outside easy explanations, challenging everything James had built his life upon. Catherine Reynolds strode through the executive floor of Reynolds Tower, her heels clicking purposefully against the marble. Employees scattered from her path, recognizing the storm in her expression. At 38, Catherine had sacrificed personal relationships for corporate success, viewing the company as her true legacy. She paused at James's office, finding it empty for the third consecutive day. His calendar, which she had discreetly accessed, showed another appointment at Dr. Chen's clinic. "Miranda," she called to James's assistant, "pull the company expense reports for the last month, specifically medical charges." An hour later, Catherine sat behind her desk, staring at the figures on her screen. The amounts James had directed toward Emma's experimental treatment were staggering. Nearly $2 million already, with projected costs climbing much higher. "This is madness," she muttered, reaching for her phone to call an emergency board meeting. As chief operating officer, Catherine had always been the pragmatic counterbalance to James's occasional flights of optimism. But since Sarah's death, she'd watched her brother spiral, first into grief, then into desperate hope that defied rational thinking. While she loved her niece, Catherine believed Emma needed acceptance and adaptation, not false hope. The board members assembled that afternoon, listening intently as Catherine presented her concerns. "James is emotionally compromised," she explained, her voice steady despite the betrayal she felt. "His judgment is clouded by grief. He's diverting significant company resources into an unproven treatment with minimal success rates." Bernard Stein, the longest-serving board member, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we remove James as CEO?" Catherine hesitated only briefly. "Temporarily, for his own good and Emma's. I'm also pursuing legal counsel regarding temporary guardianship of Emma." The room fell silent at this revelation. "That seems extreme, Catherine," said Diane Morris, head of legal affairs. "Is it?" Catherine countered. "James is subjecting Emma to painful procedures with little chance of success. His judgment is compromised in both business and personal matters." As the meeting concluded with a vote to review the situation, Catherine stood at the window, watching the city below. She told herself this was for James's own good, intervention disguised as corporate strategy. That evening, she visited Emma, finding her pale and tired after another treatment session. "Aunt Catherine." Emma's face brightened despite her exhaustion. Catherine embraced her niece gently, guilt momentarily clouding her resolve. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Sore," Emma admitted. "But Dr. Chen says that's normal." Catherine noticed the strange bronze medallion on Emma's nightstand. "What's this?" "A gift," Emma said simply. "Dad says it's for luck." Catherine picked it up, studying the worn inscription with narrowed eyes. Another piece of evidence that James was grasping at straws. Ancient trinkets and experimental medicine. A dangerous combination of desperation and irrationality. Her path was clear now. For the good of the company, for Emma's well-being, and even for James himself, Catherine would have to take control. 3 weeks into the treatment, Emma's progress had been steady, if unspectacular. The physical therapy sessions following Dr. Chen's neural stimulation had left her exhausted but determined. Small victories, increased sensation in her upper thighs, involuntary muscle twitches, fueled their cautious optimism. James had begun bringing work to the clinic, setting up impromptu office space in the waiting room during Emma's sessions. Today he was reviewing quarterly projections when his phone rang. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. James, where are you? The Warren contract presentation starts in 15 minutes. James cursed under his breath. He had completely forgotten about the meeting with one of their biggest potential clients. I'm at the clinic with Emma. Can you handle it? Catherine's silence spoke volumes. This is exactly what I've been concerned about. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss your situation. Before James could respond, a commotion erupted from the treatment room. Dr. Chen's normally calm voice raised in urgent commands, followed by a flurry of activity. I have to go, James said, ending the call and rushing toward the room. Inside, Emma lay pale and trembling on the treatment bed, surrounded by medical staff. Dr. Chen looked up as James entered, his expression grave. What happened? James demanded, pushing his way to Emma's side. She developed an inflammatory response during stimulation, Dr. Chen explained, checking Emma's vitals. Her body is fighting the stem cells. The next hours passed in a blur of tests, consultations, and mounting dread. Emma was moved to the main hospital, admitted for observation as her fever climbed. The inflammation around her spinal cord created pressure that threatened to undo what little progress they had made. We need to suspend treatment, Dr. Chen explained that evening, his voice heavy with regret. At least until the inflammation subsides completely. James sat beside Emma's hospital bed, watching her fitful sleep. The setback was devastating. Not just physically, but psychologically. Emma had invested so much hope in this treatment. His phone buzzed with messages, Catherine, board members, clients. The company was imploding in his absence, but James couldn't bring himself to care. Then came the email that shattered what little composure he had left. From Catherine's legal team, notice of an emergency hearing for temporary guardianship of Emma, citing James's reckless pursuit of dangerous experimental treatments and neglect of fiduciary duties. Mr. Reynolds? A nurse stood in the doorway. There's someone insisting on seeing you. Says her name is Harper? James found Harper in the waiting area, looking more disheveled than usual. Dark circles underlined her eyes, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. How did you know? He asked, too exhausted for anger. I just knew, she replied simply. How is she? Not good. The treatment's been suspended. James sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. Everything's falling apart. Harper sat beside him, quiet for a long moment. The medallion. Have you been keeping it close to her? James laughed bitterly. You still believe that trinket has some power? Not the medallion itself, Harper explained softly. But what it represents, hope, faith, the belief that some things work beyond our understanding. Faith hasn't done much for us lately, James said bitterly. Harper's gaze remained steady. Faith isn't a transaction, Mr. Reynolds. It's a journey. As she stood to leave, Harper swayed slightly, catching herself on the wall. James noticed for the first time how pale she looked. Are you all right? Just tired, she murmured. I'll be fine. But as James watched her disappear down the corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that Harper's sudden weakness coincided precisely with Emma's setback, as if their fates were somehow intertwined in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. After 3 days of sitting beside Emma's hospital bed, James looked like a shadow of himself. His unshaven face and rumpled clothes reflected his inner turmoil. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for the following week, and Emma's condition had stabilized but not improved. The bronze medallion lay forgotten in his pocket as he wandered the hospital corridors, seeking coffee and a moment's escape from the antiseptic smell of Emma's room. Mr. Reynolds? A nurse approached him. Your daughter's asking for Harper. Is that someone we should contact? James froze. Emma had barely spoken since the complication, yet she was asking for Harper. A virtual stranger? I'll handle it, he said, making a sudden decision. The city streets felt alien after days in the hospital. James had his driver take him to Central Park first, hoping to find Harper near where they'd first met. When that proved fruitless, he began checking shelters. At the third shelter, a converted church in a rundown neighborhood, The elderly woman at the desk recognized Harper's description immediately. She's been quite ill, Marion explained, leading James to a back room. Pneumonia, we think, refuses to go to the hospital. Harper lay on a narrow cot, her breathing labored. Despite her condition, her eyes were clear when they met his. You found me, she whispered. Emma's asking for you, James said simply. Harper struggled to sit up. How is she? Not good. The treatment caused complications. James hesitated. Why does my daughter, who barely knows you, ask for you in her time of need? Harper's smile was tired but genuine. Sometimes connections don't need time to form, only purpose. What's your purpose with us, Harper? James asked, the question that had haunted him for weeks. To remind you, she said softly. It's not about the medallion, Mr. Reynolds. It's about believing when there's no reason to believe. Something in her words, their simple conviction, broke through James's exhaustion and fear. Come back with me, he said impulsively. There's plenty of room at my place. You can recover there, see Emma when you're stronger. Harper studied him as if measuring the change in him. You don't even know me. I know enough, James replied, and I'm tired of fighting alone. As his driver helped Harper into the car, James felt a strange certainty that this was right, bringing this mysterious young woman into their lives fully. Catherine would call it another sign of his instability, but for the first time in months, James felt steady. His phone buzzed with an update from Dr. Chen. Emma's inflammation was beginning to reduce. They could potentially resume treatment in 2 weeks. Good news? Harper asked, noting his expression. The beginning of it, James replied, finding the medallion in his pocket and holding it tightly. The beginning of believing again. The Reynolds penthouse, normally pristine and impersonal, had transformed in the week since Harper arrived. The guest room now contained her few possessions, her presence somehow softening the modern edges of James's carefully designed home. Emma had returned from the hospital 2 days ago, her condition stable but her spirit dampened by the setback. Catherine's reaction to Harper's presence had been predictable. You've invited a homeless stranger to live with you and Emma? She had hissed during her visit, keeping her voice low to prevent Emma from overhearing. This is exactly the kind of impaired judgment I'm concerned about, James. She's not a stranger anymore, James had replied calmly, and Emma responds to her. That's enough for me. The guardianship hearing loomed just 3 days away, casting a shadow over every moment. James divided his time between preparing with his legal team and working remotely, determined to prove he could balance Emma's care with his corporate responsibilities. Today, he sat at his dining table converted into a makeshift office, reviewing documents his lawyer had sent regarding Catherine's petition. The allegations were painful to read: emotional instability, financial irresponsibility, exposure of Emma to untested medical procedures with significant risks. Mr. Reynolds? Harper stood in the doorway, looking stronger than she had a week ago. The color had returned to her face, though she still moved with careful deliberation. Emma's asking for you. James found Emma in the sunroom, her wheelchair positioned by the large windows overlooking Central Park. The bronze medallion hung around her neck, catching the afternoon light. Hey, sweetheart, he said, sitting beside her. How are you feeling? Better, Emma replied, though her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. Dad, am I going to live with Aunt Catherine? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Who told you about that? I heard you and Harper talking. Emma's fingers toyed with the medallion. She thinks I can't get better, doesn't she? James chose his words carefully. Your Aunt Catherine wants what she thinks is best for you. She's just afraid of you getting hurt. But you're not giving up? Emma's eyes, so like Sarah's, searched his face. Never, James promised. We're in this together, all the way. On the morning of the hearing, James received a call from Dr. Chen. The inflammation has resolved faster than expected, he reported. We could potentially resume treatment next week, with modifications to prevent another reaction. Hope surged through James as he dressed for court. Harper helped Emma prepare, styling her hair and selecting an outfit that made her look both childlike and dignified, a difficult balance that somehow felt important for the proceedings. The courtroom was smaller than James had expected, more intimate and therefore more intimidating. Catherine sat with her attorneys, her expression composed but her eyes betraying her conviction that she was doing the right thing. James's lawyer presented their case first, documenting James's unwavering commitment to Emma's care, his recent business accomplishments despite personal challenges, and expert testimony from Dr. Chen regarding the treatment's potential. Catherine's team countered with financial reports showing the enormous sums directed toward Emma's treatment, medical experts questioning the procedure's efficacy, and carefully selected instances of James's erratic behavior since Sarah's death. "And what about this woman, Harper, who now lives in your home?" Catherine's lawyer asked during cross-examination. "Can you explain your relationship with her?" "She's a friend who has been instrumental in Emma's emotional well-being," James answered steadily. "A homeless woman you met in a park," the lawyer clarified, "with no medical credentials or verifiable background." Before James could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Harper entered guiding Emma's wheelchair. Against medical advice and court protocol, James had arranged for Emma to make a brief appearance, a risk his lawyer had strongly advised against. The judge leaned forward. "Young lady, you should not be here during proceedings." "Please, Your Honor," Emma said, her voice small but clear. "I need to show you something." Catherine half rose from her seat, her face a mixture of concern and frustration, as Emma wheeled herself forward, stopping before the judge's bench. "My treatment was working before the complication," Emma explained. "I can prove it." With determined concentration, Emma focused intensely, her face flushing with effort. The courtroom fell silent, watching this small girl in her wheelchair, the bronze medallion gleaming against her dress. And then, almost imperceptible at first, her right foot moved. Just a slight lifting of her toes, but deliberate and controlled. The judge's eyebrows rose as murmurs filled the courtroom. Dr. Chen, present to testify, rushed forward with his tablet, showing the judge previous baseline measurements of Emma's neural activity. "This is new," he confirmed, his professional demeanor barely containing his excitement. "This is voluntary movement where none existed before." As the judge called for order, James caught Harper's eye across the room. She smiled, not in triumph, but with quiet certainty, as if she had known all along that this moment would come. 2. Courtroom buzzed with renewed energy following Emma's demonstration. Judge Martha Simmons, a silver-haired woman with decades of family court experience, called both legal teams to her chambers, leaving James, Catherine, and Emma waiting anxiously in the nearly empty courtroom. "Did I do okay, Dad?" Emma whispered, clutching the bronze medallion. "You were perfect," James assured her, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "Absolutely perfect." Across the room, Catherine sat alone, her normally composed features troubled. After a moment's hesitation, she rose and approached her niece and brother. "That was impressive, Emma," she said softly. "I didn't realize you'd made such progress." Emma reached for her aunt's hand. "I'm getting better, Aunt Catherine. Dad and Harper and Dr. Chen are helping me." Catherine's eyes flickered to James. "I never wanted to hurt either of you. I just—" She paused, searching for words. "I was afraid you were both chasing impossible dreams out of grief, that Emma would suffer more disappointment and you would destroy yourself trying to achieve the impossible. Sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer," James replied, using one of Sarah's favorite sayings. The lawyers emerged from the judge's chambers, followed by Judge Simmons herself. Her expression revealed nothing as she resumed her position at the bench. "In matters of guardianship," she began, "this court must prioritize the child's best interests above all else. Ms. Reynolds has raised legitimate concerns about experimental medical treatments and financial decisions." James felt his heart sink as the judge continued. "However, the court cannot ignore the clear evidence of Emma's progress, nor the strong bond between father and daughter. Furthermore, Dr. Chen's testimony regarding the scientific basis for this treatment, while controversial, is supported by peer-reviewed research. Judge Simmons looked directly at Catherine. Ms. Reynolds, your petition stems from genuine concern for your niece. This court acknowledges your intentions as protective rather than self-serving. Her gaze shifted to James. Mr. Reynolds, while your pursuit of treatment for Emma is understandable, the court advises more transparent communication with your family regarding medical decisions and greater balance between Emma's care and your professional responsibilities. The courtroom fell silent as everyone awaited the verdict. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied, Judge Simmons declared. However, this court will schedule a review in 3 months to assess Emma's ongoing treatment and Mr. Reynolds' adherence to our recommendations. Relief flooded through James as Emma squeezed his hand tightly. Across the room, Catherine's expression was unreadable. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen approached with barely contained excitement. The movement Emma demonstrated today, it's exactly what we hope to achieve at this stage. With the judge's ruling, we can resume treatment next week with modified protocols. Outside the courthouse, Catherine caught up to them. James, wait. James paused, bracing for another confrontation. I was wrong, Catherine said simply. Not about being concerned, but about how I handled it. She knelt to Emma's level. I'm sorry I tried to separate you from your dad. I was scared. Emma, wise, beyond her years, smiled. It's okay to be scared, Aunt Catherine. I'm scared a lot too. The company needs you back, Catherine added, looking up at James. But we can find a better balance. Maybe hybrid schedules, more flexible meeting times. James nodded, offering his sister a tentative olive branch. I'd like that. As they drove home, Harper sat quietly beside Emma in the back of the car. She had barely spoken during the courthouse drama, but her presence had been a steady anchor for both Reynolds. How did you know I could move my foot today? Emma asked her suddenly. I didn't even know until I tried. Harper smiled mysteriously. Sometimes we see the path before we walk it. Your body remembered how to move, it just needed you to believe it could. James caught Harper's eye in the rearview mirror, 1,000 questions still unanswered about this young woman who had appeared in their lives so providentially. But for now, those questions could wait. Today was for celebrating the first real victory in their long journey, not just Emma's physical progress, but the beginning of healing for their fractured family. The modified treatment protocol began with renewed hope. Dr. Chen's team had adjusted the stem cell concentration and slowed the neural stimulation intensity to prevent another inflammatory response. Emma approached each session with determination that impressed even the medical staff. She's quite extraordinary, Dr. Chen told James after the 3rd week of renewed treatment. Most children her age struggle with the discomfort, but Emma seems to transform pain into purpose. James nodded, watching through the observation window as Emma chatted animatedly with the physical therapist. She gets that from her mother. The changes were subtle at first. Increased sensation in her lower limbs, more consistent toe movements, improved core strength. But 6 weeks into the resumed treatment, during a routine physical therapy session with Harper present, something remarkable happened. I want to try standing today, Emma announced. The physical therapist, Denise, exchanged glances with James. Emma, we need to be patient with the process. Please, Emma insisted, just with the parallel bars. With careful support from Denise on one side and Harper on the other, Emma was positioned at the parallel bars. James held his breath as Emma gripped the bars tightly, her face a mask of concentration. Remember, Denise coached, don't force it. Your body will remember in its own time. Emma closed her eyes, the bronze medallion gleaming against her therapy shirt. For several moments, nothing happened. Then, with agonizing slowness, Emma began to shift her weight from the supports to her legs. That's it, Harper encouraged softly. Trust yourself. Inch by inch, Emma pulled herself upright until she stood, trembling but vertical, supporting a fraction of her weight on legs that hadn't carried her in 3 years. The moment lasted only seconds before her strength gave out, but the impact was seismic. I did it, Emma whispered as they lowered her back to the wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I did it. James couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions he had kept tightly controlled for so long. It wasn't walking, not yet, but it was the undeniable beginning of possibility. News of Emma's progress transformed the atmosphere, at Reynolds Tower as well. Catherine, true to her word, had restructured operations to accommodate James's treatment schedule with Emma. The board members, once skeptical of James's priorities, now expressed cautious support for his family-focused leadership approach, as the PR team cleverly branded it. The Warren contract came through, Catherine announced one afternoon, joining James in his office after he'd returned from the clinic. Largest deal in company history. That's your victory, James acknowledged. You carried it across the finish line while I was distracted. Catherine shook her head. Our victory. I presented the logistics, but they signed because of the innovation you pushed last quarter. She hesitated. James, I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the courtroom version. You were trying to protect the company, he replied, surprised by the lack of bitterness he felt. No, Catherine corrected. I was trying to control something when everything felt out of control. After Sarah died, watching you pour everything into this treatment for Emma, I was terrified you'd be destroyed when it failed. And now? Catherine smiled ruefully. Now I'm learning that sometimes impossible things happen. Speaking of which, she added, changing the subject, have you learned anything more about our mysterious Harper? James shook his head. She doesn't talk much about herself. Emma adores her, though. He paused. It's strange, but sometimes when I look at her, I see glimpses of Sarah, certain expressions, the way she tilts her head when she's listening. You see Sarah everywhere, Catherine said gently. That's natural. But James couldn't shake the feeling that Harper's connection to them went deeper than chance. The way she had appeared in their lives precisely when they needed her inexplicable knowledge of Emma's condition, the almost synchronous improvement in both Emma and Harper's health. It all suggested something beyond coincidence. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? Catherine suggested, ever practical. If she's living in your home with Emma. No, James said firmly. Harper has her reasons for privacy. When she's ready to share her story, she will. If summoned by their conversation, Harper appeared in the doorway. Emma's asking for both of you, she said. She says she has something to show you. They found Emma in the physical therapy room that James had installed in the penthouse, with her walker positioned before her. She gave them a determined look. Watch, she said simply. Gripping the walker tightly, Emma pushed herself to standing. Then, with excruciating slowness, she moved her right foot forward 6 inches. Then her left. 2 small, wobbling steps that represented a journey of thousands, of miles. Catherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. James felt his vision blur with tears. As Emma took a third shaky step, James caught sight of Harper standing in the corner, her expression a mixture of joy and something else, something that looked almost like recognition, as if she were witnessing the fulfillment of a long-held vision. In that moment, James knew with absolute certainty that their journey with Harper was far from over, and that the medallion she had given them was merely the first thread in a tapestry of connection none of them yet fully understood. The Reynolds penthouse buzzed with activity as Emma's progress accelerated. Physical therapists came daily, equipment-filled rooms once reserved for James's minimalist art collection, and Harper had become an integral part of their household. Emma could now take up to 15 assisted steps before needing to rest, a miracle by any medical standard. James had gradually returned to a more active role at Reynolds Tech, but with a new perspective that prioritized balance. The company was thriving under the shared leadership of the Reynolds siblings, with Catherine handling day-to-day operations, while James focused on innovation and long-term strategy. One evening, as Emma rested after therapy, James found Harper on the terrace gazing at the city lights. 3 months had passed since she'd entered their lives, yet she remained an enigma, helpful, compassionate, but guarded about her past. You've never asked me for anything, James said, joining her at the railing. Most people want something, Harper smiled. I have everything I need. Still, I'd like to help you beyond temporary housing. Perhaps a job at the Reynolds Foundation? Your way with Emma shows you have natural talents for working with children. Harper's expression shifted. That's very kind, but you need documentation, James finished. Social security number, employment history, references. Something like that, she admitted. I have resources, James offered. People who can help with your situation, but they'd need to know more about you, where you came from, how you ended up on the streets. Harper fell silent, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she sighed. I've been in foster care since I was 3 days old. 19 different homes by the time I turned 18. Some were decent, others. She shook her head. When I aged out of the system last year, I had nowhere to go. Your parents? James asked gently. My mother gave me up at birth, left me with just the medallion and a letter saying she couldn't care for me but wanted me to have this family heirloom. Harper touched her neck where the identical medallion had once hung. I never knew my father. Something about her story stirred an uncomfortable feeling in James. Were you ever able to find information about your birth mother? Just a name, Harper replied. Sarah Adams. The world seemed to tilt beneath James's feet. Sarah Adams, his late wife's maiden name. When is your birthday? He asked, his voice barely audible. February 12th, Harper answered, puzzled by his sudden intensity. Why? James gripped the railing for support. 20 years ago? Harper nodded slowly. Mr. Reynolds, what's wrong? Without answering, James went to his office and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside lay a small wooden box containing Sarah's most personal items, letters, her wedding vows, the journal she kept during her illness. Beneath these was an envelope he had never opened, marked simply, "If something happens to me." With trembling hands, James broke the seal and removed a handwritten letter. My dearest James, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I can finally share the secret I've carried for our entire marriage. Before we met, when I was just 20 and still in college, I had a baby girl. It was a difficult time in my life. My parents had just died. I was alone and overwhelmed. I made the heart-wrenching decision to give her up for adoption. I left her with only 2 things, a bronze medallion that had been in my family for generations and my maiden name in her adoption records. Perhaps someday she'll find her way back to the family she never knew. I've wanted to tell you so many times, especially after Emma was born, but fear held me back. Fear of your judgment, fear of disrupting our perfect family. Now, facing my mortality, I realize these fears robbed us all of potential connection. If by some miracle our paths cross with hers, please tell her I never stopped loving her, and that giving her up was the hardest choice I ever made. Forever yours, Sarah. James looked up to find Harper watching him from the doorway, concern in her eyes that, now that he looked properly, were unmistakably the same shape and color as Sarah's. Harper, he said, his voice breaking, I think you're Sarah's daughter, my wife's daughter. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock. What? That's impossible. She was 20 when she had you. She never told me. James handed her the letter. The medallion you gave Emma, it's identical to this one in the photograph. Harper read the letter, her hands shaking. This can't be real, it's too convenient, We can verify with DNA testing, James offered. But the medallion, your age, your mother's name. There are too many coincidences. Harper sank into a chair, overwhelmed. If this is true, then Emma is your half-sister, James confirmed. You found your way back to your family without even knowing it. As the reality settled between them, 1,000 inexplicable things suddenly made sense. Harper's instant connection with Emma, her appearance in their lives precisely when they needed her most, the way she sometimes echoed Sarah's mannerisms. I should go, Harper said suddenly, standing up. This is too much. I never meant to. Please don't, James interrupted. Stay. We've all lost so much already. Maybe this is Sarah's way of bringing her family together even after she's gone. The DNA test results lay unopened on James's desk for 3 days. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, a part of him feared what scientific confirmation might mean. For Harper, for Emma, for the fragile new reality they were constructing. Harper had moved her few belongings to a hotel the night of their discovery, insisting she needed space to process everything. James respected her decision but remained in contact daily, checking on her well-being while giving her the distance she requested. Emma, too young to fully comprehend the situation, only knew that Harper had family business to attend to and would return soon. Her therapy continued, her progress uninterrupted by the emotional earthquake reshaping the adult relationships around her. Catherine, when told of the discovery, had responded with uncharacteristic emotion. "Sarah had a daughter before you met?" she had asked, disbelief evident in her voice. "And she never told you?" "She was young, alone," James explained. "Her parents had just died. She made the choice she thought was best. And now her daughter appears in our lives like some cosmic coincidence?" Catherine shook her head. "It's almost too perfect to believe." "Which is why we did the DNA test," James replied. Now, sitting alone in his study, James finally opened the envelope. The clinical language confirmed what their hearts already knew. Harper was Sarah's biological daughter with 99.98% probability. He called Harper immediately. "The results are in. It's confirmed." A long silence followed. "I'll be there. In an hour," she finally said. The reunion was quiet, restrained. Harper entered the penthouse hesitantly, as if seeing it through new eyes. Not as a temporary refuge, but as a piece of a heritage she hadn't known was hers. Emma, delighted by Harper's return, was the bridge between them, her innocent joy cutting through the awkwardness. "I'm going to show Harper my new standing record," she announced, using her walker to lead the way to the therapy room. Alone later that evening, Harper and James sat in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond, the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I have so many questions," Harper began. "About her, about why she gave me up." James handed her Sarah's journal. "She started writing this when she was diagnosed. There are entries about you, not by name, but about the baby she had given up. Her regret, her hopes that you were happy." Harper traced the cover with gentle fingers. "Did she ever try to find me?" "She considered it," James admitted. "But she was afraid of disrupting your life, afraid of how I might react." He paused. "I wish she had told me. I would have supported her decision to search for you." "Would you?" Harper asked directly. "Or would you have worried about how it might affect Emma, the company, your perfect life?" The question stung with its accuracy. Pre-accident James, pre-loss James, might indeed have resisted such complications. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I was different then, less open to life's messiness." Catherine arrived as they were talking, carrying a large portfolio. Her relationship with Harper remained tentative, built more on mutual respect than warmth. "I thought you should have these," she said, opening the portfolio to reveal family photographs. Sarah as a young woman, around Harper's age. The resemblance was striking. These were from before James met her, from her parents' home. They rightfully belonged to both of her daughters. The gesture, so unlike Catherine's usual pragmatism, brought tears to Harper's eyes. "Thank you." "There's something else," Catherine continued. "The Reynolds Foundation is expanding its youth outreach program. We need someone who understands the foster system firsthand, who can help design interventions that actually work. If you're interested, the position is yours." Harper looked surprised. "You'd trust me with that, you barely know me." "I know enough," Catherine replied, echoing James's words from the hospital. "Besides, your family. Complicated, unexpected family, but family nonetheless." Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged. Harper moved into the guest suite permanently, but maintained her independence, spending days at the foundation offices developing programs for foster youth. James and Catherine restructured the company schedule to ensure one of them was always available for Emma's therapy sessions. Emma, thriving under the attention of her expanded family, progressed to walking with just forearm crutches. Dr. Chen called her recovery unprecedented, though he attributed it to the combination of innovative treatment and extraordinary psychological support. One evening, as James watched Emma and Harper looking through Sarah's old photos, he felt Sarah's presence more strongly than he had since her death, not as a ghost of grief but as a thread connecting their past to this unexpected future. She would have loved seeing this, Catherine said softly, joining him at the doorway. James nodded. She found a way to bring her daughters together, even if she couldn't be here to see it, and to remind you how to live again, Catherine added. Sarah always did play the long game. 1 year had passed since the day Harper had first approached James and Emma in Central Park. The Reynolds penthouse, once a monument to minimalist design and emotional restraint, now hummed with life. Family photos, both old and new, adorned walls that had previously showcased only abstract art. The spring sunshine streamed through the windows as Emma practiced walking with just a single cane, her progress defying every medical prediction. At 11 years old, she had developed a determination that impressed everyone who knew her story. "Remember to keep your shoulders back," Harper coached gently from across the room. At 21, she had blossomed in her role at the Reynolds Foundation, her program for aging out foster youth already garnering national attention. "Like this?" Emma adjusted her posture, taking 3 more confident steps. "Perfect," Harper affirmed, the pride in her voice unmistakable. The sisterly bond between them had grown naturally, as if their hearts had recognized each other long before their minds understood the connection. James observed them from the doorway, marveling at how thoroughly his life had transformed. Reynolds' tech had evolved as well, with the launch of the Adaptive Technologies Division, a new branch dedicated to developing affordable mobility solutions inspired by Emma's journey. "The auditorium is nearly full," Catherine announced, joining him. "The press is here too. Are you sure Emma's ready for this kind of attention?" Today marked the official unveiling of the Sarah Reynolds Memorial Center, a comprehensive facility for children with mobility challenges. Emma had insisted on presenting the opening remarks herself, her first public appearance since beginning treatment. "She's been practicing for weeks," James replied. "Nothing stops Emma these days." The ceremony began at noon. James, delivering the introductory speech, found himself scanning the audience filled with medical professionals, corporate partners, and families of children like Emma. Dr. Chen sat in the front row, his experimental treatment now in clinical trials with dozens of new patients showing promising results. "And now," James concluded, "I'm honored to introduce the true inspiration behind the Sarah Reynolds Memorial Center, my daughter, Emma Reynolds." The audience applauded as Emma appeared from the side of the stage. Collective gasps followed as she walked, slowly but steadily, using only a decorative cane. Harper stood just off stage, ready to assist if needed, but Emma had been adamant about making this journey alone. "A little over 3 years ago," Emma began, her voice clear and confident, "I was told I would never walk again. My mom had just died and my dad and I were both lost in grief." She paused, her hand unconsciously touching the bronze medallion that still hung around her neck. Then a stranger approached us in the park with an impossible promise. That stranger turned out to be my half-sister Harper, a miracle my mother somehow sent to us when we needed her most. Emma took another careful step forward. "What I've learned through this journey is that healing isn't just physical. Sometimes the hardest steps are the ones our hearts need to take. Steps toward hope when everything seems hopeless, toward connection when we feel most alone." From his seat, James felt a wave of emotion as he watched his daughter, so like Sarah in her courage and wisdom, command the attention of everyone present. "This center isn't just about cutting-edge treatment, though we'll have that too," Emma continued. "It's about creating a community where families facing challenges like ours can find not just medical care, but hope and belonging." As Emma concluded her speech to a standing ovation, James caught Harper's eye across the stage. In that moment of shared pride, he felt Sarah's presence more strongly than ever, not as a painful absence, but as the invisible thread that had drawn their fractured pieces back into a new whole. The medallion that had once seemed like a simple trinket now hung in a display case in the center's main hall, its inscription illuminated. Faith moves mountains, but first it must move hearts. That evening, as the family celebrated privately at home, Catherine raised her glass in a toast. To Sarah, she said, who found a way to heal us all, even after she was gone. And to impossible things, Harper added softly, which sometimes just take a little longer. Emma, standing without support for a full minute, her new record, completed the toast with childlike simplicity. To family, the one we lost, the one we found, and the one we built together. As James embraced his daughters, one he had raised from birth, one who had appeared like an answered prayer, he finally understood the true message of the medallion. Faith hadn't just moved mountains. It had built bridges across the chasms of loss, connecting past to future, grief to hope, and strangers to family. The Reynolds family, once shattered by tragedy, now stood complete in a way none of them could have imagined, different than before, marked by their journey, but stronger in the broken places where healing had occurred. And somewhere,